Yeah. Sure do. It's just nice.
Okay, great. I'm live.
When you get off the So this is like February. We'll see with that.
Do you have a way to get a hold of a technician? I can't hear you.
Is there a way to get a hold of a tech? He needs a technician to help him hook up.
Oh, what's the problem?
Just connecting with his adapters.
He doesn't have the right adapter?
Yeah.
Well, let me try to get him. Okay.
Howard? Yeah. I'm going to help you. I'm Alfredo. How are you?
What did they figure into his system? I don't know what these guys works.
Okay.
Is it something? I have like 3G line. I can finish it though.
Design QAs from now until Wednesday, last week. I'll QA on Thursday, and then Friday. I haven't been checking that. March 2nd. This was last week.
She signed it. It's been a week.
Alan will QA on Thursday. He was Friday.
Okay. So, how long will it tricky? Because it doesn't matter. Yes. The bill.
Right, so the building is going to come the week after.
Give me a heads up for my video page.
A week start, right?
Oops.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you back. Up next, we have RAHUL NAGARE, who's going to be addressing us on how to secure WordPress in the age of 0-day vulnerabilities. Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you. Can you hear me at the back? All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Rahul. I'm the co-founder of Nestify and Scale Dynamics. We do WordPress hosting, scaling, that sort of thing. At work, I'm responsible for securing WordPress and WooCommerce sites for companies like PetSmart, Walmart, Disney. And Today I'm here to share the same security tips that we use on those types of sites. WordPress has a reputation for being insecure. It's not true, but even if you start a search with a W, one of the suggestions is, why is WordPress not secure? Now, I can't help you with any of the other symptoms on that list, but I can help you make your WordPress site secure. The thing with WordPress is, it's actually pretty secure by itself. The contributors do a good job of keeping it that way with all the core updates and everything. So where does this reputation come from? Well, WordPress security issues, more often than not, are the result of something called a zero-day vulnerability. What are those exactly? So these are the security issues found in WordPress plugins or WordPress themes, and usually hackers try to use them in an automated fashion. These can be introduced to your site during plugin updates. For example, you can have a secure site and a plugin has a security issue, you update that, you install that update, and now suddenly your site is at risk. And these are not just limited to free plugins or themes. If you look at this site, it maintains a list of all the security issues with WordPress plugins, themes, WordPress core, and there are some premium plugins on this list. Elementor was on this list a few days ago. So when a security issue is discovered like this, hackers try to attack as many WordPress sites as possible, as quickly as possible. Think of it this way. How many of you have seen this in your mailbox? Or a variation of this? And how many of you have actually called that number and bought something? So the way this scam works, these companies will just mail that same letter to every zip code, every mailbox in the neighborhood, and even if 2 people buy something, it's profitable. Similarly, hackers try to attack as many WordPress sites as possible, and even if 2 or 3 of them have any security issues, it's worth their time. Why hackers try to hack WordPress sites if you just have like recipes or something on your site? Why do they try to attack your site in particular? Well, the reasons come down to usually these 3 things. First is to redirect your traffic to some other location. So hackers can do stuff like distribute malware or send visitors to Canadian pharmacies, that sort of thing. Next is to inject links on your site, so SEO rankings of their malware sites get higher, SEO improves. Finally, hackers can use your site and an army of hacked WordPress sites to attack some other target. Now, how do you use a security issue that was discovered in a plugin or a theme? It's somewhat simple process. First thing you need to do is you need a list of all WordPress sites, and this part is easy. You can go to sites like Built with, Public Web. They will give you a list of million WordPress sites and all the plugins that each site is using, all the plugin versions and everything. You pick a site, try this security issue. If it works, great. If not, you go to the second site, go to the third site, and so on. And in order for these hacks to be profitable or worthwhile, hackers need to attack as many sites as possible before this hack is fixed in the plugin update. So they try to use automation and just attack as many sites as possible. And because they use automation, we can do certain things to our WordPress site to block those attacks and improve the security. First one is when hackers try to redirect your traffic to some other location. It's usually done with updating the site URL and home values in your WordPress database. And if you edit the wp-config file on your site like this, and just replace mysite.com with the actual URL of your site. After that, even if you have an insecure plugin and hackers do update those values, WordPress will still refer to these values and your site will not be redirected to some other location. Next is general purpose protection against a large number of plugin option updates, plugin hacks. The way these work, and this was in Duplicator a couple of days ago, hackers try to access the plugin options pages from WP-admin, and they will try to inject some code or change some options, and every now and then plugins let anyone change those options without having to log in. So what we can do is just block access to WP-admin and open that to your home and office IP. So in this example, you would change the XX and YY with your home IP address, office IP address, and any other locations where your editors or anyone else that accesses WP-admin lives. And we also open admin Ajax. So your plugins will continue to work, your contact forms and anything else dynamic, that will continue to work. But if hackers try to access WP-admin, they won't see anything, they will get access denied message. So even if you have an insecure plugin, they won't be able to see that. Next is general purpose, common spam, code injection, pop-ups, all of that sort of thing. If you add this stuff to your htaccess, and again, replace my site with the actual URL of your site, what this will do is, it will block any post requests which are used in most of these hacks if they don't come from your site. So again, your contact forms will work, your WooCommerce will work, all the transactions will work, but if someone in China is trying to post a message on your site, automatically, they won't be able to see that. Now, what do you do if your site was hacked in the past, there are still some infections, code injections left? You can instruct web browsers to ignore all of those injections and only load the clean content that you authorize on your site. You can do that using a content security policy. So again, edit your htaccess file and enter this code. In this example, we are instructing web browsers to only load the CSS, JavaScript, images, all the assets of your site from your domain, from Google Analytics and Google Maps. So if you have a content security policy like this, and a hacker injects some JavaScript on your site, browsers will simply refuse to open that. And you can see those errors in the developer console. But it will not affect your site or it will not infect your visitors. And this also protects your site from different cross-site scripting, frame blockers, all other general purpose security. And when you apply all these principles together on your site, let's look at the results. Redirects on other sites, blocked. Code injections and plugin option updates, blocked. Using your site as army, as a part of the bot army to attack someone else, also blocked. Now you still need to maintain good security practice like strong passwords, using better hosting, web application firewalls and such, but using these principles along with other security measures will block a large number of those automated attacks and will keep your site secure even if you fall behind on your plugin updates. You can download these slides on the nestify.io URL, and if you have any questions, here. Thank you. Yes?
Do you have any specific advice for mitigating a DDoS attack in real time?
Well, the way things are right now, you're better off using Cloudflare or some professional solution. AWS has DDoS mitigation. Pretty much every provider has that now. The way I see it on WordPress, you get someone trying to access the XML RPC or WP login URLs from 1,000 different IPs. If you just keep blocking IPs, they will use other IPs. The way it works, the way I found it effective is if you block the user agent, these attacks are coming from, let's say, Chrome 42 or something like that. So block Chrome 42 in your htaccess or on your firewall, and even if hacker keeps using proxies or different IPs, they won't be able to see your site. And instead of returning 403 response code to block those attacks, if you return something like 404, or if you have Nginx, you can return 444. What that will do is hackers end up thinking, again, if it's a targeted attack, it might not work. But for general purpose DDoS attacks, they end up thinking this site went offline or it's not running WordPress, they just move on. And I found that to be pretty effective. Yes. I mean, you can do that, but I found if, again, you would use some plugin like WordPress or any other number of plugins that can do that, but it will not actually improve your site security. Hackers can still do code injections and use XML RPC or the WordPress API to attack. So it's fine to block some human factor, but it's not that effective to actually secure your site.
What recommendations do you have for the firewall? Server level type of,
So I don't like to use plugins as much as possible, but you can do Cloudflare. Cloudflare has a $20 a month plan that actually does WordPress security as well. So if you go to firewall, they will stay on top of that vulnerability list and they will block all the exploits. So even if you don't have plugin updates on time, Cloudflare will block those for you. So that works pretty well. Then you have stuff like Security and Malcare. WordFence also has a CDN firewall. So yeah, but I wouldn't use plugins as such. I would try to mitigate that on the server or the CDN level as much as possible.
Do you relate WordPress with Docker?
Yeah, I mean, we don't use WordPress on any of the sites, but they have other application firewalls and blocks like this, and they seem to get pretty good results. My complaint with WordPress is it makes your site slow, and every now and then admins get locked out, so I don't like to use it. All right, so if you have any questions, I'm on Twitter, or I'll be here entire weekend. Thank you.
Rahul, thank you very much. That was very interesting. It's only a matter of time before every one of you get your website. Thank you very much. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. It's a realistic concern. I'd like to introduce MERARY Alvarado, who's going to be talking to us about accessibility, digital transformation, and social digital transformation. MERARY.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me yet?
Yeah.
No? I need to. Can you hear me? Yes? No, perfect. Okay. So let me share my screen. Okay, perfect. Well, first of all, thank you very much for attending this lining. And my name is MERARY ALVARADO. As you can hear, it sounds like in the Spanish version, so you can call me Mera. It's better and short, easy to pronounce. I am from Costa Rica. This is my first time in Miami. I'm so excited, and also this is my first time participating in this WordCamp in English. So if you don't understand something, you can meet me at the happy word. So. I would like to introduce a little bit about the topic, and actually it's pretty important for us that we are working with sites and developing different options. And actually I would like to mention that in my experience working with people with disabilities, the most biggest problems that they have is usually that the sites are not accessible. And what it means that many of the options are not accessible for them, images, videos, or functional components of the page. So it's important to keep in mind that. So I would like to give you a couple of global considerations when we are talking about accessibility. And it's, for example, accessibility, it's not a plugin or a feature. It's a constant process. Actually, we think that by applying an add-on or a component, can you see me? Oh, yes, I can see like a dance or something. Actually, they don't understand that it's important to keep it as part of the process. Another thing that is important is also together with this accessibility effort, we need to design a strategy, like design strategy, so we can have visual information designs properly designed for people with disabilities. And the most important and the last one is when the client understands what is the importance of the accessibility, they will recognize that it's necessary to make some efforts in budget to improve their sites. Now, I would like to add this because it's important to be clear. There is any project 100% accessible, and also if someone promises you fully accessibility, well, it's a liar, right? Because actually it doesn't exist. So the accessibility is constantly evolving, our debate, because we have a lot of different components across the different, the different moments. Okay, I will back. Okay. It's clear the idea, right? I'm a little bit nervous, so sorry for that. Okay, that's the part that I want to mention. When we talk about accessibility, we usually think in technical components only. But when we design, and if you don't understand about the disability, it's not possible to create accessible components. I don't know if it makes sense. Okay? So, what do we need to be careful when we are designing about accessibility? When we don't understand about disabilities, we are incurring in a bias, or we are just having a perception about it. And usually when we design based in our own abilities, and we are not keeping in mind other abilities. Therefore, some of the users are excluded immediately when we are designing. So it's important to keep in mind that sometimes we didn't grow up surrounding for people with disabilities. So actually we don't know how to treat them. And also we are not able to communicate with them because actually we feel so terrified because we don't try to to make any offense to them. So it's important to keep in mind. And if you want to know a little bit about disability models, you can meet me at the Happiness Bar. Okay, it's very important to understand that there is a really variation of our types of disabilities. And actually we have the first one, which is the permanent. It's the one that we can notice. We can notice when a person is blind or deaf or is in a wheelchair. This is the permanent, we can notice that. And the other disability that we can need to keep in mind is the temporary. For example, you just suffer an accident, and if you can see something, or if you have laryngitis, it's important because you can talk, so you need to figure it out what to do. Then, the other type of disability is the situational. For example, today I'm speaking in English, and my native language is Spanish. Sometimes some words are not the same, but it's important to keep in mind that there is also a situation that we consider. And the last one is the invisible disabilities. What is that? Everybody in this room have suffered this one. Nobody's safe here. So actually, we need to keep that in mind also when we are designing. These kind of invisible disabilities can also affect our vision when we are designing or we are developing a functional component. So it's important to keep that in mind. Well, actually, in United States, 1 of 5 people have a disability. And it's important to mention that around the world, there is 1.6 billion people. That represents like 20% of the population. However, I went in a conference last year in Ecuador, and I read this. They are planning, or they are noticed, that young people specifically are losing their hearing, and they are having some statistics that probably in 5 years, most of the young people will be deaf. So this one will increase that number, and also that is visible. We having a lot of aging people. So it's important also when we are designing, keeping in mind that. When we are developing, keeping in mind that. Everybody needs to use the phone, everybody needs to pay bills, everybody needs to have credit cards or cards to make some diligence. So it's important to keep that in mind also. Now, when we understand the range of disabilities, we need to also understand the internet disabilities. Those are different because we have a lot of variations if we are blind, or we have low vision, or if you are colorblind. But we can categorize all the information in 5 main areas. For example, visual, hearing, mobility and dexterity, speech and cognitive. And being cognitive, the most common across the web. Okay? Now, there are a lot of types of normatives in terms of accessibility. And actually, we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is amazing. You have a really good reference to improve buildings, to improve sites, because it's required. Another important normative that we have is the Web Content Accessibility Guidance, or I can call that WCAG. I said that, I don't know, but it sounds good for me. But then we have this section 508, which is applied specifically for public services. And then, why those are important too? Because, for example, if you are developing sites focused on flights, you need to keep that in mind, the ACAA normative, together with this one, okay? Then if you are creating video content, like TV shows or something, it's important to keep that in mind, that one. And also, if you want to make or create a new browser, so you need to keep in mind the first one. And if you are working with CMS, that is WordPress, you need to work with the A tag. If you have more questions, you can. Yeah. Okay. Actually, what is the most important thing here? Levels of conformance. Actually, they require a level that we need to accomplish when we are creating sites is the AA. It has the biggest and most common barriers for people with disabilities, and according to the internet disabilities that we saw before. Okay? Now, what will be the best practices that we need to keep in mind when we are creating sites? First of all, reshape the bias. Why is that important? Because actually we think that accessibility is only a technical requirement, and it is not. if the owner of the project or the project manager is not agree with accessibility, we don't have money, right? So it's pretty important to that. So what we need to take in mind? Well, we need to reshape the accessibility culture. If the people knows about accessibility, they will definitely keep in mind that during the development process, during the design process, and also when we are gathering our requirements. The other thing that I want to mention is we need to create commitment with the senior, with the sponsors, because if they provide us the money, we need to be careful that they need to understand what is accessibility about, right? And also try to contact accessibility experts, because trying to level in that knowledge since the beginning is kind of difficult. It took months. So it's important to have that in mind. Now, another important thing is review the scope. What is your site? What type of site you have? It's a project focused on innovation, like you want to work with IoT or artificial intelligence or cloud computing. What is your site about? So if it is related to innovation, you need to keep that in mind when you are planning. And also, when you are redesigning, you need to contact designers, experts in accessibility as well, and include it as part of the requirements. Then probably we have a site, but we don't have money to redesign, and we need to work only in code. So it's important to measure that effort as well. And then if we are continuously applying accessibility best practices, we also have the maintenance process. We also need to calculate that, because anytime we make changes over the sites, we need to consider this future. Okay, now measure, measure, measure. All the time we need to measure. But also we need to coordinate a couple of internal projects. Like, for example, I do recommend that if you want to integrate accessibility as part of your processes, you please, the same project manager, don't do the same of accessibility requirements. You need to have separate teams, because even though we are planning related to accessibility, it will be completely different to planning across the software development lifecycle. It's different. So you need to keep that in mind. And also another important thing is invest in the accessibility consultants. That is pretty important, because during the transition of my project to be accessible, we need to have experts. If we have experts, we can have the proper tools, we can measure the proper scenarios, we can specialize and create different components. Okay? Then we have test. I know most of the people that we are here hate to test. I know that. But in the case of accessibility, it is really, really, really important. With the testing, we can avoid to have a lot of things really bad that can go in really bad. For example, if you miss a bug related to accessibility in production, it will be not so easy like roll back the site and go back with a new change. In this case, if we miss a bug related to accessibility, it could be a lawsuit. So it's pretty important that. Then, I would like to mention that not all trendy topics are accessible. Please keep that in mind. When we are selecting themes for WordPress, there are a couple of them so beautiful, visually well designed, with a lot of functional components. But, for example, you want to customize a component to make it accessible, it will be not possible. And sometimes we need to offer our services to different clients. And actually, for example, if they want to make that fancy themes, but it will be not accessible, we have the tough decision to tell them, I'm sorry, but I cannot use that because it's not accessible. And it's difficult because we need to make business, right? So it's important to keep that in mind also. And the latest slide that I have right now is if you have some failures related to accessibility, you will have lawsuits. And the lawsuits will not be related because your site is not accessible. It's because you are excluding people. If you're excluding people, you will have some lawsuits. So it's very important to keep that in mind. And if you need more information, try to look for the Americans with Disabilities Act and also try to validate the case of Domino's Pizza. So it's pretty common. So even in Costa Rica. So actually, it's important to keep that in mind. That's my presentation. I don't know if you have any question? Yes?
Is there any active enforcement by any government agencies or regulators or anything like that? Or is it just brought about by individual lawsuit act?
Well, actually, there is, well, that's an important question. Actually, for ADA, mostly the section 5A that I mentioned before, let me just try to go back. Okay, actually, usually when we have non-public companies, mostly the persons with disabilities are the ones they promote to the lawsuit. But in terms of public governments or public sites, they have usually lawyers and people that is looking to have the proper vision of the site so they can promote to make the lawsuit. So this is one of the things. Yes? Well, yes, I have. Yes. Yes. Well, actually, I do recommend a couple of based on Gutenberg because they're really important. Really important. And with Gutenberg, you have really good reviews. However, we're running out of time, but if you have more, you can send me an email, and definitely I can give you the list of the plugins that I usually use when I develop sites, so you can have the information at hand, so we can provide you that information. But actually, just keep in mind that even though we are using add-ons or plugins, this plugin is covering only the 30% of the content. The 70% needs to be validated by the end user. So it's important to keep that in mind also. I don't know if I have more time for more questions. Sorry? Yes, I will share the link to the organization so you can download it.
Thank you.
No problem. So thank you very much.
Okay, everybody, next up is Tara King, who's going to be talking to us about command line basics.
Hey everybody, thank you so much. I am Tara King, I work at Pantheon. We are a web ops platform for WordPress and Drupal. I am currently the developer outreach manager there, which means I get the privilege to come into WordPress and Drupal community events, give talks, meet people, bring your feedback back to our team. But before I was doing this job, I was on our support team. So I was meeting a lot of WordPress people who would come in with all kinds of questions. And sometimes I just was like, oh, try this command line tool. And there was this panicked response of fear. And so I wanted to go out into the community and sort of provide this very basic intro. So that's what today is all about. I am Sparkling Robots on Twitter. Would love to hear your thoughts there, or meet you on Twitter. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This is my first WordCamp that I'm speaking at, so super excited to be here. Look at that, thanks all. A little bit about my technical background. I don't always go into this, but I do think it's relevant to this talk. So I actually come from the Drupal community. I was gifted a Drupal site and didn't have a development budget. So I started learning how to change it, fix it, get better at it. And for many years, I was just teaching myself, getting better and better. And I kept coming up against this wall of, oh, just tar that, just run this tar command to get their files, just run this command. And I was like, I don't even know where to run that command. I don't, just a lot of fear. And I didn't know why it would be easier that way, right? Like, in WordPress, you can download a plugin that will make a backup of your site, or you can use the command line. And so a lot of times I would just take what I thought was like the easy way around and not use the command line. But when I finally got over that fear, I feel like my skills as a developer just super accelerated. My workflows got a lot more robust. I stopped having quite so many white screen of death moments on websites. So trying to speak to the me that was too scared to start using the command line. So I hope some of you are in that spot too. So is anyone here never used the command line? All right, it's for you guys, for those of you out there. Hopefully you'll still get something out of this if you are familiar, but it is very much aimed at the beginner. So we're gonna cover some basic concepts, vocabulary of the command line, that kind of thing. So what is it, right? What is this mysterious command line tool that's gonna turn us all into super developers? It's not this. It looks cool, but it's not that. It's just this, it's just a window. It's really not exciting. When you're watching a hacker movie and there's just a lot of typing and screens of text flying, it's not like that. Concepts, what? Oh, sorry, that kind of thing. But it really is at its heart just a place where you can type commands to the computer. That's all it is, it's just a box where you can talk to the computer. I'm gonna compare it to what you're maybe more used to, which is the graphical user interface. If you're not familiar with what the graphical user interface or the GUI is, it's basically visual representations, sort of visual metaphors. So that's why you have windows and you have icons and you use your mouse a lot, or you might use your text or your voice to command it. The CLI, the command line interface, basically does the same stuff. It's just a text-based interface. So you may be wondering right now, why would I move away from all my cool icons and visual metaphors to something that's text-based? And I think there are a few reasons. It's a lot faster. Rather than the experience of trying to navigate to a file or a specific folder by mouse click or navigating windows, it's so fast to navigate using the command line. It's really efficient, a lot fewer keystrokes. I actually The more I use the command line, the less I have like repetitive stress injuries. Not a doctor, but it's been my experience. It also lets you automate, so you can use scripts to repeat the same tasks or to build out a workflow. It can be really, really powerful. And of course, you do actually look awesome when you have a terminal window open and people are like, what kind of cool stuff are you doing over there? Before we get started, I do want to give a word of caution. As much as I don't think the command line is a terrifying and scary place, there are less guardrails. So when people are building your Windows-based or Mac OS, they'll do things like, are you sure you want to reformat your hard drive? Are you sure you want to delete every file you have? The command line has some of those, but often it just says, okay, you want to do that? Sure. There is a really great video on, I think it's on YouTube still, about Pixar during the making of Toy Story 2. One of their engineers ran rm-star, which is a delete command, deleted literal months of work from hundreds of people. They actually had enough time to unplug the machine from the wall to stop the command from running. So even professionals make mistakes. Thankfully, they had backups. That's the #1 rule with anything, have backups. So that's why we have Toy Story 2 today. But if even professionals can make those kind of mistakes, make sure you're paying attention. If somebody gives you a command to run, read it. Like, learn how to read it, learn what all the different parts do. Make sure you know what you're doing. On the other hand, don't panic. This is an achievable skill. I believe in you. We're going to get there. Okay. So, we're going to start at the very, 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 very basics of command line tools, which is how to open the terminal. Terminal is another word for the command line, also known as the console or the shell. I have Mac and Linux instructions up here. Windows are a little bit different. All these commands are a little different on Windows. We can talk at the happiness bar if you have questions. This is what happens. It's very exciting. Don't get too excited. It's a big black text box. This is your terminal. And we're going to break down what's happening here. This is called the prompt. So this is sort of a zoomed in version, anatomy of a command. So your prompt is the very first thing. Sometimes when you're like Googling a command, it will have a $sign in front of it. And I've done this actually, and I've seen people do it, where they enter the $sign. That is not necessary. It's just to show you that it's the beginning of a line. And then you have your cursor, which is just like a word processor cursor. It tells you where you're entering the text. So that's the basics. Typically, the first thing you enter is the command itself. This is what you want the computer to do. Sometimes just the command is enough. Sometimes you need to specify where you want the computer to take this action. That's the argument. So you pass this means rm is remove. Foo.txt is your argument. That's a file that's going to be removed. You can also specify how you want the computer to take this action. And that's with an option or a flag. So this basically is a built-in way of altering what happens on the command line. In this case, that's -F is for force. So if you had permissions issues or something, you could forcibly remove it. This is really where people, I think, get into trouble sometimes. You can string together a bunch of options, and you think you know what you're doing, and you don't. So options, although they're very small, do have a lot of power. This is from a command line tutorial. I'm going to be tweeting the link to the slides. There's a short link at the end. Highly, highly recommend, if you're getting started on the command line, walking through the tutorial when you have your computer out and you can try all this stuff. So we've opened our command line. I don't know how many of you are familiar with text-based adventure games from the 80s. All right, yes. I am not alone. So in these games, you're basically entering text into a command prompt like this, and the computer is giving you information. I like to think of the very first time you're on the command line as sort of like a text-based adventure game. So you walked into a room, it is dark, and you have to ask, where am I? PWD is the magical incantation that will tell you where you are. So I hope this is big enough to see, but if it's not, this basically is the output on the bottom line here of what directory you're in. In my case, it's in my user directory. That's the name of my WordPress site, and I'm in this WPCFM plugins folder. So this will tell you, you're in the dungeon, or in my case, this plugin folder. So then you might ask, What can I see? What's in the room with me, right? So you use ls. ls lists the files in a directory. It also lists the directories. So one little bit of command line lingo is directory. This just means folder. It's the same thing. So we run ls, and the computer tells us there are these 10 things in here. But you look at it and you think, this isn't a file. Assets is probably a folder. So let's see how we can make this a little bit more user-friendly, get us the information we really want. Now we're going to try an option. So ls, it's actually two options, -al. -a shows you all the files, so even if something's hidden, it'll show you, and then it'll show you in long format. So we're going to try this particular incantation and see what comes out. If you're anything like me, the first time I saw this, I was not sure what I was looking at, why there was so much information here. We're not going to cover everything here because we only have half an hour and we've got lots of stuff to cover still. But basically, we're going to focus on the left-hand side. This side talks about two different things. The first character here, the D, means it's a directory or it's a folder, or sorry, a file. If it's a file, it'll be a dash. So that's all it says, folder, file. The next three sections are actually just the same information. There are permissions for this file. So if you've ever tried to delete something and the computer says no, and you say, why not? And it says you don't have permission. This is actually where that information is tracked. There are three types of permissions. It's a lot like a WordPress user. Some users can do things and some can't. You can read the file, which means you can look at it. You can write to the file, which means you can edit it. Or you can execute the file, which means you can run it, typically with a like PHP or programmatic file. So there are three sections here, and that's because there are three groups. So the owner of the file gets the first one. There's a group, a user group that can access it, that's the second one. And then everyone else basically is the third one. These are very important. There's a lot of ways to change it. I'm not going to go super far into this, but I wanted to show you how you could at least find the information. So if you're having permissions problems, this is a good start. So yeah, that's the left side of ls-al. So much stuff. So we're going to go over to the right side now. I'm going to leave this open so you can still see if it's a directory or folder. I mean a file, I keep saying that. On the far side is actually those same names of the files and directories. So now you can kind of get a little bit more information about these and start to navigate around. So unlike a text-based adventure game where maybe they're a little stingy with the information, this will just tell you everything that's in the directory where you are at the moment. If you want to change directories, you use cd, change into directory. All these paths here, like wp-content/plugins, will be relative to where you are at the time. This is why print working directory, PWD, is so important. It helps you sort of stay oriented. If you're in your WordPress root, you can easily get to wp-content/plugins. If you're in your plugins folder, typing wp-content/themes isn't going to work. You're going to have to do it relative to where you are at the time. We talked a little bit about remove. You can remove files or directories. You can also make them. And there's a ton that's just built into the command line in both Mac and Linux systems. So even if I spent the entire half hour on this stuff, it wouldn't be enough. First thing I would suggest is to Google it. If you Google it, you'll see people writing articles about like the 7 best ways to use tar or whatever command, and see the ways they're using different options. It will really open up kind of the possibilities for you. You can also use the man page. Man is short for manual, and it's built into the command line. So man ls will show you all the options that are available to you with that command. And then there are also things like -h or --help. When you put those into the command line, it will give you more information about that particular command or about that tool. And then -v will give you version information or also make the command verbose, which means it prints out everything that it can. So we're going to move on. Tons of information here. Please keep learning. It will only improve your life as a developer. Text editors are used on the command line because this is a text-based interface. You want to be able to edit text files, right? You wouldn't want to edit photos in the command line, so we're going to use text editors. There are a bunch of them built into your operating system. Vim, Nano, Emacs. There have been wars. not real wars, but flame wars about text editors. And my personal opinion is that the best text editor is the one that you like to use. I got started with Nano. It felt very intuitive. The first time I tried to use Vim, I got like locked into a screen and couldn't figure out how to, I just closed the entire terminal. I was like, can't get out. So I like Nano just because it's what I've always used, but like power to you. If you want to be a power user, use one of the other ones. To open it, you just type the name of the program. So in this case, Nano. And this is what's going to happen. So up till now, we've been typing in like a line of text and hitting enter to execute the command. Now we've got an interactive window. The top up here is basically where you type your text. So this might be your PHP file or your text file, your README. And then down on the bottom are the different commands. So here you can use Control-G to get more help, to learn what's possible with Nano. So yeah, this is just really helpful. If you're working on a project, rather than having to go fire up Sublime Text or fire up your IDE, you can just open the text editor here directly in the command line, find the line that you need to change and make the change super quick.
How do I get there?
So this is, when you're on the command line, you just type Nano. That's the name of the text editor.
How do I get to the command line?
That was slide 2. I can you can go back to that later. It basically, if you have a Mac, you can search in the searchlight for terminal. It's just called terminal. It's built into the machine. So since we're all web developers, we're often going to want to be connecting to other computers, right? You might build your stuff locally, need to push it to your host, or maybe you're working remotely directly on your host file. So we're going to cover 3 kinds of connection. There's FTP, SFTP, and SSH. FTP and SFTP are really the same protocol, but one of them is secure. So I'll let you pick which one you want to use, but I know which one I like. SFTP and secure shell are not quite the same thing. They're both secure, but the secure shell is actually sort of like opening a command line prompt on the other computer. They can be restricted depending on the host and all kinds of things, but the SFTP protocol, that'll let you move files, rename files, delete things. SSH will actually let you run commands on the remote machine. So that's kind of the difference. It was confusing to me when I got started, so I wanted to include it here. Another thing you'll hear about with SSH keys is, or SSH is SSH keys. Basically a single one-line command that you can run that will create 2 files. They're like very complicated passwords. You send one to the remote computer and you keep one for yourself. And when you try to log in, that computer will say, are you who you say you are? You have the other file on your local and it compares the 2 and then you can get in. So this was actually probably the first thing I ever did on the command line was running SSH keygen, which is the command you need to make an SSH key. We've got documentation on pantheon.io about how this works. Strongly suggest you try it out. Doesn't involve any navigation or anything like we've covered. It's pretty straightforward. Version control, it's like my favorite thing. We don't have time to actually learn version control today, I'm very sad to say. So I just wanted to give a high-level concepts about Git specifically, because unlike with text editors, I actually do have a very strong opinion about version control systems. Even if you're not using version control today in terms of Git or something like it, you're probably using a similar system that looks like this. You've got a project, you name a file, my cool project. And then you make some changes and you want to keep both the old one and the new one, so you rename it my cool project 2. And then you make some more changes. Now you've got 3 files, but it's fine because you know what 3 is. It's higher than 2, so you use 3. And then you do something very bad and you make just a few changes. You name it 3B. You're not really committed to it. So you send it to me for feedback, and I send it back to you and it says, my cool project 3B Terra, because I want you to know that it's the one I altered. And then you send my version over to Steve. Now we've got my cool project 3B Terra Steve.txt. Yeah, it's rough. So you think, okay, my cool project final. I'm done. But you're never done. You're never done. It always gets worse, right? I mean, I am not pointing fingers. This is me. I have been here. So what Git does is it basically does the same thing, right? It lets you track all your versions, you keep all the old stuff, you know who made changes when, you know what changes they made, but instead of having to compare This monstrosity, my cool project, final 2, last change I promise, with my project 2, Git does it for you. So it's a really powerful way of tracking on a file by file, line by line, character by character basis, every change that is made to your code base. There's a ton here. I could do a day-long workshop on Git, but highly recommend checking this out. Git-scm.com is sort of like the website that has all the documentation about it, has a bunch of diagrams about how branching works and how workflows should go. But this is the undo button that you've always wanted. So if you're tired of pushing something to live or like working on your site and bringing it down and not knowing which file changed because you did the work last week and you've slept since then, Git's the answer for you. Oh, there we go. There's our git-scm.com/about is the URL. I'm going to skip the diagram because we are running a little short on time and I don't have time for questions. Last but certainly not least is WP-CLI. This is a very WordPress specific tool. So if you're not using WP-CLI right now, it basically does whatever you can do on your admin interface in WordPress via the command line. And you might say to yourself, why would I do that if I can already do it in the admin interface? And the answer is you can do it a lot faster. I don't know, you can also, sometimes the site breaks and you actually can't access the admin page and you're like sitting on your hands because you don't know what to do. WP-CLI can fix a lot of those problems for you. These commands are a little bit different looking than what we've talked about so far, but they're still the same basic structure. The command is actually the first 3 words. So WP indicates you're using WP-CLI, lets the computer know what tool you want to use. There are kind of like categories or groups of commands in WP-CLI. This one is the user group. And then create is the specific task you want to take. In this case, we're creating a username Tara. That's would be my account username. This is my email address for that account. And then you can pass in an option here to say that this person is an author. So like I said, if you've ever had trouble accessing the admin, or if you wanted to script and upload a bunch of new users or something like that, this is an option. You can also install plugins using WP-CLI. So this is super quick. You can also then commit it to Git and have it in version control, and your life will be so wonderful if you do this. So this one's really fun. And this one is really, really fun. WP plugin update -- all. I actually don't always recommend doing this, but it's very fast. So, if you want to run all your plugin updates, this will go in and do that. And just to highlight something, sorry, wrong direction. You have the same format, right? This is the plugin group of commands. We have install, and then we have update. So it's all kind of conceptually related to just anything that really interacts with plugins. You can also remove them, do all kinds of things. And then the last example I have for WP-CLI is WP search replace. I know the first WordPress site I built it in like a test environment. I needed to move it to the live environment. It had all these URLs in the database that were wrong. I was like panicking because it's launch time. WP search replace will go through your database and replace test.example.com, that's your source URL, with your target, which is the second one. It's super helpful in any kind of deployment situation. It's built into the Pantheon dashboard so that you never have that panicked moment of why is everything pointing at the wrong domain. And then we pass a couple options here. All dash tables is to show that it's going through the entire database. And then verbose actually will print out the actions that it's taking. If you don't do that, it's sort of a silent operation. Okay, so what comes next? If this isn't enough for you, there are more and more and more and more command line tools. You could get into batch scripting, you could get into Composer, you could get into running Docker on your local, all kinds of things. So don't give up. If you're getting started on the command line, you're gonna have so much more power in your workflow. So highly recommend just getting started, just running like one command today. Just give it a try. Here's my link to my slides. All of the links are in there, and there's also another slide at the very end. That slide has links to articles about each of these concepts and a few extras, so you can actually dig in if you think, oh, I really want to know how this works. They're all available there. If you haven't seen my talk.rocks, go fill it out if you don't mind. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm actually giving this same talk in Albuquerque in 3 weeks and would love to incorporate your feedback, so let me know what you think. And that is it for me today. I am Tara, I work at Pantheon, I'm Sparkling Robots. Do you have a few minutes for questions? All right, questions? Yeah, of course. Here you go. There you go. Yeah.
Just thinking about some of the work that I've done recently in migrating websites, and the command line for WP search replace. That's only going to do like the WP config file, right? That's not going to do the database. Does the database do it? Wow. That would have saved me a lot of time.
It updates all the plugins. So if the plugin updates the database, that will run, but it goes through checks what needs to be updated and then downloads a new version.
You know, I often use what we used to call WP Manage to update all my plugins on all the different websites I manage. Is there a way that you can script this command line for update so that you could basically have it poke its nose into every one of, say, 20 different websites so you can do all the updates hands-free?
Yeah.
How?
I can talk most explicitly about how it works on Pantheon, but basically if you have a list of your websites, so on Pantheon that's provided, but if you were to make one, you can basically have it run through each of those sites. You'll have to, I haven't done this specifically with WP CLI, I've done it a lot with Drush, which is the equivalent tool in Drupal. So you'll have to basically pass in the site credentials so it knows which site it's working on, but we can talk later and I'd be happy to show you some scripts examples. Yeah. Any other questions? I didn't. You can just, I think, install it with Composer or curl.
Curl.
It's not a plugin. Yeah. And I actually don't know. I was going to say in Pantheon it's pre-installed, so I don't do it very much. Sorry. I will add that for next time, and we can maybe do some Googling at the happiness bar or something afterwards. And yeah, you can install it locally.
Just to add something real quick is that I'm almost positive that yesterday at the workshop we looked at it, and I'm almost positive that the WP CLI runs over the WordPress root folder. So as long as you're already in the directory, it should run positive.
Thank you. The link's not working?
Yeah.
I'll figure it out. Check my Twitter. It'll have the wrong link because I pre-scheduled a tweet that will have the wrong link now. But we'll figure that out. Sorry, it's a bummer. Thought I checked it. Sparkling Robots, all one word. It's kind of tiny up there in the corner. I don't know if it's any bigger. There's my resource slide. Sparkling Robots. Sorry about that, that's a bummer. If no other questions, then I will get off the stage and let the next person come up and see you at the happiness bar if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. That was awesome. Next is going to be MERARY. He's going to be talking about the translents and AI. Actually, with WordPress, we're going to get started in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, seriously, first WordPress talk, that was awesome. You see it a lot. Sometimes they can be trademarks. That was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool.
We're all under this comment.
Hello. Just testing, sorry. Actually, I could speak without the mic, but. Sorry? Well, this is a disaster. I'm going to start in a bit, but I was supposed to give him the slides so I could share them, but my computer kind of crashed. So we're going to have to wait a little bit. I'm restarting it as we speak, so my apologies for that. Oh, I can't believe it's, I hope it didn't die, otherwise I'll be running that door, the exit one. Well, I don't know what happened. Well, let's do it now. I'm going to do a hard. That's true. You know, I was once in a WordCamp and I forgot how to change the password within PHP, my admin, because I had locked myself out locally. And like, you'd be surprised at how many people know it. And there's always a solution, yeah. I'm going to put the slides up before I begin to talk, because I've noticed that people do ask for them. And you kind of forget after you speak, so I'll better do it now.
All right, looks good. Let's get this going. I'm sorry. It's okay. We'll be fine. Everything's working. Fortunately, there's no demo. That's also another embarrassing moment when it doesn't work. Okay, I'm ready, officially. Good afternoon, everybody. That is correct, thank you. First fault of our talk this afternoon. There we go. Officially, we're on. Just a presentation. Okay, that's me. Thank you. Applause for that one. Okay, to please the gentleman over here, you can follow me on Twitter on this feed, and slides are going to be up now. That was part of the problem. My name is Marco BERROCAL. I am a WordPress, well, it's fine. I'm a WordPress developer out of San Jose, Costa Rica. I'm also a WordCamp organizer there. Ours is in September, in case you guys are interested. And I'm a WordPress fanboy in the event that I absolutely love WordPress. I've been working in the ecosystem for more than 10 years. I also work for Green Geeks, which is a sponsor here. And my job when I'm not developing is go from WordCamp to WordCamp to be either a sponsor or attend a conference or speak. I like to contribute with WordPress, which is why my second slide is all about a huge thanks to the sponsors, organizers, and volunteers, and of course you guys. Without you guys, none of this would be possible, and I'm really, really thankful for the turnaround this afternoon. From a development point of view, this talk looks like a massive success. I hope I don't disappoint you all. Okay, so I'm going to talk about caching. Who is not familiar with caching? Great. That is great stuff. Okay, we're all familiar with caching, right? I mean, the importance of it is pretty obvious. It's very, very fast to load a site via caching, as opposed to, not using it. Users are thankful for that. Your SEO gets a boost, and everybody seems to be happy. Who here uses plugins for that? To cache? Okay, a vast majority of us use plugins for that. There's W3 Total Cache, there's WP Super Cache, there's a bunch of caching solutions out there. But sometimes there's going to be limitations to that. What do I mean with limitations? For example, I was working on a project and it couldn't handle get parameters within the URL because everything was cached on the server. And caching plugins use a combination of memory cache and CDN networks in order to cache all the assets. And sometimes you can't really execute certain parts of your site, but you still want the caching. For example, if high traffic sites, if you have a news site and there's breaking news, I mean, breaking news is not going to work really much if you have everything cached and the caching is set to run every 12 hours or so. So sometimes you need the flexibility of having the content to be served dynamically, but you also need to cache certain parts of your website. So in other words, you need control as to what to cache and what not to cache. And that is exactly what my talk is going to be about. It's going to be about transients. with transients, the API, which is something that is not very popular, I would say. It's very underrated. It's something it's not discussed a lot in the geeky and developer blog posts. And I like to speak about things that are either not very known, like the CLI talk she just gave, which is very handy. But it's very good thing to know in order to realize it in the next project that you may have, and that you say, oh man, I can't cache all this stuff, but maybe I can use the transients to do that. So you can store data quickly, partial data. You can either do that in memory or within the WP options table, but with a few twists. All of you know the WP options table? All of you do? Okay, cool. Sometimes the caching, the transients API works in memory, like actual server memory, but this really depends on the server-server scenario, and I'm not going to go into details with that. But if it's not available, it's going to store this information in the WP options table. But the twist here is it's going to be with a lifespan. With a lifespan that you as a developer are going to set. Like you're going to set an option and you're going to indicate how long is this going to live within that caching system, either within memory or in the WP options table. So when you are developing and you are like, okay, I want this option to run every 12 hours, well, you set the data that it stores in that options table for exactly 12 hours. It has its own methods. This I specify because when I mention that it's within the WP options table, some people assume that it's going to be the same as registering settings within the WordPress API, which is a completely different thing. I'm going to show you both if we have time, but it uses the same table, but the only difference is that the WP option, like the settings API, doesn't have a lifespan. It stores the data forever. Whereas the transients API, it stores the data on a specific lifespan that you as a developer can give. Like I mentioned, it uses the DB, it uses the database to store information. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to store information, be this a string, an array, an object, or anything we can think of within that table, the WP options table, and with an expiration. And that's really it. But we're going to look at scenarios, of course. It's not limited to simple stuff. Like I said, you don't necessarily need to store an integer or a string or anything like that. You can actually store like a whole blob of HTML. You can store even custom loops, which is frowned upon and not frowned upon. It depends on who you ask. You can store objects, arrays, anything you can think of that you might be able to use and access quicker. You can store it in there. So we know the options API. I know this is not the talk for it, but I'm going to give you guys an example of how to use the options API so that you guys can take a look at it, and then we compare it with the transients API. I'm going to show you the methods in order to register the options and to display them, and then we're going to use the transients to know so that when you look at code, you can tell the difference. Okay, in here, I'm just adding a menu called WordCamp Miami menu. It's pretty basic stuff. It has the function, it has the hook called admin menu, it has the name, the title, what my capabilities are to edit it. In this case, it's manage options. This is the options name, which I put in comments so you guys know. And this is my callback, which I'm going to put in the next slide so that you guys get to look at. And this is just, what should I call it? A icon, yeah. The last one is the dash icon and the priority, which is 100. The callback for this menu is going to be this one. It's basically going to be a form field where I register the settings. In this case, I'm just calling it Miami section. And I am registering the options for that particular settings called do settings options and a submit button. Okay? The next slide is going to be when I actually hook into the options, the particular options that are going to display within my settings page. So in this case, I'm adding a section called Miami section, specifying the name, the display name, which is title, and the callback, which is the third argument, and the option name, which is called WC Miami options, which is what I'm going to go back a little, which is why I registered here initially. So when I register a setting, I have to make sure that the proper options go with it. hand in hand. That way the register settings sections knows which options to grab. Let's go forward a little bit. Oh, sorry. The fields, and I'm registering fields. So every time I need to register a field, be this text, radio button, checkbox, whatever, I use the add settings field function. I once again specify what the name of the field is going to be, what the title will be, what the callback function is going to be. In this case, it's going to be display Miami field. And what option is this tied to? Again, I'm tying both the section and the fields to the WC_Miami options. So this way, all of this gets integrated, and it gets bundled in. So when you run a certain function called the do register settings, which is the one here previously, it's going to display all the options that you already registered. The only thing missing here is a hook that calls these this method. But what I want you guys to look at is that this is what's going to display on the WordPress dashboard. It's going to display just a title, a field, you input and you save the changes. But when you look at it from the database point of view, you just see the ID, the name of the field, and its value. If you look at it below, you'll see a transient which has a value in it. It has two. WordPress typically comes with a few transients integrated, like with plugins, with timeouts, and all those sort of notions. Because once again, you have to think about which data can be considered as volatile, that you can recycle every X amount of seconds or minutes, and which ones are not. So this option I just gave it to you so that you guys can take a look at what is permanent and what isn't. Because how do we set them? With transients, we just call the function, we call the key, in this case Miami color, the value of what that is going to be. Like I told you guys before, you can use any type of data that you guys can think of. It's the value parameter, it's mixed, it can be an array, it can be a string in this case, it can be an integer, it can be a Boolean, it can be an object, or whatever you guys can think of. And the time, how long do I want this data to be available within the WP options table? So in this case, I'm using a constant called days and second. This is a constant that is available since WordPress 3.5, 3.4 or something. Like if you guys like, oh, how many hours are in a day? Instead of grabbing a calculator, going to Google and do that, you just type in day in seconds or week in seconds, years in seconds. And that's how the stuff, so WordPress will automatically calculate the value for you. So that's a pretty nice little tip there. So that's how you set it. Once you do this, you are adding the value of this within the database, within the WP options table. If we take a look at this, let's see if I did that. Uh-oh. I actually didn't, but since my computer died, let's see. Let's log in as root. I'm using a utility tool called SQL Pro. This way, it's a graphical user interface, so that I don't have to type a lot of commands. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at the WP WordCamp Miami table. This is a table for WordPress installation, and I'm just going to go to WP options all the way below and see the Miami color right here. Like I said, it adds the prefix of transient and underscore, and then the value that I defined here. If you look at my slide, right where my cursor is, Miami color, and this is the value. And this is the amount of time it's going to be available to you. There's a cool little plugin, because WordPress is all about plugins, that you can use when you develop. It's called, let me show you the name, because I restore previous session. This little tool is called the Transient Manager. It's a plugin that you can install on your WordPress development or production, it doesn't matter. Well, actually it does matter, but it's all up to you. And you can look at it in the Tools Transient option right here. And you can take a look at all the transients that you have installed. And this way, if there's something that you need to edit or delete, just do it within the dashboard as opposed to going into the database and doing it directly. Some people prefer to work within the database directly, others prefer to go through a plugin and do that. So with this, you can see all the transients that you have installed within your WordPress installation. So in this case, this is the transient that I set it with the set transient function. This is how much it takes to expire. If I was to edit this and, oh man, I don't have the code, so don't worry, we'll do it next time. And that's pretty much how you do it. And how do I get this information? You get it, let me see. You get it by calling the getTransient function, where you basically are calling the key that you previously registered within setTransient. In this case, if we go to the previous slide, our key is going to be Miami color. So how do I use this in actual code? This is a small snippet of code where I'm using an action called WP footer. I'm declaring my own function here, and I'm asking for the getTransient function with the key. In this case, it's Miami color, and the variable that will hold this is called my super transient. So I'm going to ask if this is false. If this is false, let's echo this out. We need to bounce back. There is no transient. And if it's true, my super transient is available, and this is the value of it. So if, you know what, looks like we're gonna have to run code. There's no way out. So if I go to Miami, WordCamp Miami, over here, and if we go right here, this should be injected all the way at the bottom where I'm saying my super transient is available, and this is the value. Again, I'm just using a simple string here. You could use whatever you guys can think of. And when you look at any page, you start thinking about which components do you think you can store within that variable and which ones definitely not. Let's say I wanted to delete it, because usually when you are developing plugins, if you are good and you have your nice ethics and you care about your WordPress users, you're going to delete the transients when somebody deactivates the plugin, because you're not going to need that information anymore. So you would do your users a favor by deleting that information. This is why sometimes when you have a slow WordPress site that has had a lot of plugins, you need to look at the database to see how many transients are hanging in there that have absolutely no use anymore. And this way you can, trim it down a bit, because the WP option table is not indexed as opposed to the WP post table is. So after, like, let's say 500 to 1,000 records, this table starts to really, really slow things down. So when you are looking at clients who have like a gazillion plugins installed, I mean, we all work with clients like that before. Anybody who hasn't? I thought so. So when we have a client that has a lot of plugins installed and you start to deactivate them, take a look at the transients to see which ones are actually in use and which ones aren't. And you can install that utility plugin that I told you guys about, and you just can delete it. Or you can just run the delete transient function over here in order for you to just delete it yourself. You just run the function, you put the key value in it, and it just disappears. I'm going to see if we can do that. Live code, I will guarantee you it's going to work. Open recent, and let's go to 2020. Okay, it should be here. And since I'm a nice guy, I commented this out. So I'm going to run this, and next time I refresh this, the transient should be deleted and not available. So we're bouncing back, there is no transient set. So, like for example, if you guys have a Twitter feed or something and you guys want to do your logic there, you could ask if there's a transient for Twitter available. If it is, display it. So this way you'll have your latest tweets there. And if not, get the tweets out of the feed, store them in a transient, and then just echo them out. So this way, the next day or the next time the user comes into it, instead of feeding that information from the server, from Twitter, you're just going to look into the transients API, using the transients API, you're going to show them what's stored in the WP options table with a lifespan. So again, you may say, okay, how long should I hold this in memory for? I mean, that's really a decision that you guys as the developers need to think about. Each case is different, each client is different, but what my key takeaway from this talk is that you guys can think of the data and can actually say, okay, I'm going to store this, I'm going to cache this for a day, I'm not going to cache this, we're going to cache this, etc., etc. And what else? We're going to delete it. So examples. I gotta be honest with you guys, I was gonna give you guys a lot of examples, but since this is my first talk about this subject this year, well, I didn't have enough time, but I'm gonna give you some examples. I just gave you the one from social media. From social media, you can pretty much run it, get the feed, use transients, and validate. I mean, do I have the latest tweets inside my transients options within the WP options table? Yes. Do I have it? Give it to me. If not, go fetch them on Twitter. A menu. This might sound crazy, but sometimes menus can take a lot of, you need to validate certain data. Am I on this page? Am I here? Is the user logged in? Is the user this? Like every time you're asking something off the database. So again, if you use the transient API, you can just say, okay, do I have a menu stored within the WP options table or in cached called X? If so, give it to me. If not, regenerate. And you can even go as further and say, okay, every time I post a menu or I post a new menu item, I'm going to regenerate the transient. So let's say you have a menu and you just want to put a new recipe in it, and you just post a new recipe, and the transient gets deleted behind the scenes that you as a developer, of course, would do, and you would just store the new transient back again within the WP options table, and this way it's cached right away, because the next user who's going to connect to your site is going to get a copy of that. And this way you handle that nuances that when you work with plugins, I don't know if you guys ever made changes like, oh, I got to delete the cache, you know, so you delete the cache. But this way with hooks and filters, you can actually do that, and you can set the tone and say, okay, instead of a time variable, I'm going to use it every time I update a menu or something like that. For custom post types, this is also very useful. Again, like I said previously, some people might argue against that, saying that you shouldn't put the whole WP query in a transient. Like I said, it can hold an object, so you can put the object in it, and you just can fetch through it. Like, let's say you were a developer or a designer who had a portfolio, and you're like, okay, man, it's not like I have work every day, you know? I might as well store my latest, I don't know, 10 gigs or 10 latest clients I've worked with, and I'm going to post that inside the transient. I'm going to put the values that I need inside the transient, so the next time a user goes into that page, he's going to get the copy of that. He's not going to actually fetch the post off the database. So again, you are saving some. Some might argue that, and again, this is a super duper hardcore geek stuff. I mean, you can say, okay, I'm still calling the database. Yeah, it is true, but it's just the targeting a certain value within the options table is far more specific than doing a whole query based on post type limits and the more parameters that you add for that particular query. Huge queries. I mean, this one is pretty cool. Let's say when you have a site like my site, I mean, I'm not that popular. I have like maybe 10 posts, but let's say you have a huge news site who has 10,000 posts. And when you want to get the popular ones, the ones with the most comments, or the ones that are specific categories, I mean, when you start querying that's a pretty damn heavy statement there. So you might as well store a few handful of posts within the transient API, and you just fetch it once again. Widgets, I personally don't use widgets a lot, but some people love them. So instead of, you have your sidebar, and you can just store your entire sidebar or just a widget of it within the transient, and you just call the transient and you're done with it. Notices and licenses, this is useful for people who develop plugins, and like, for example, I don't know if you guys have used plugins, like you have the Pro version, and they tell you after a year, hey man, you have to renew, you know? we noticed you haven't renewed, blah, blah, blah. You can set the value within a transient, and after a year, it's going to expire, it's going to fire a different hook, and it's going to tell you, listen, you got to renew. Or if you have a notice within your site, like a news site or a recipe site, we just have this famous recipe, so you put the transient in there and make sure that you have an expiration date, like as to when the promotion expires and whatnot. I know you can do that with WordPress and go into the post and edit the post and whatnot, but this way as a developer, you just set it and forget it and you're done. Which means more free time to prepare talks and all that stuff. Use them wisely. These are my tips. Use them wisely. It's not like you can have the whole page filled with transients and you're going to have a huge WP options table in your WordPress installation. Like I said, the amount of records that this table can hold is not infinite. Have the ethics, if you're developing plugins, to delete the transients when your users are done with it. This is good for you, this is good for your users, people will notice these things and they're not saying, oh, I left some values in there. This is your DB. I forgot where I put that. I'm sorry, it's just that I think that when my computer crashed, yeah, I had that idea in there. I'm not done completely, I had some small advertising. I know to do. I just wanted to let you guys know to get involved in your local community. I'm from Costa Rica, but I know some of you might be local to Miami. Get involved in the meetups, follow social media, all the WordPress meetups and WordCamps that are held within the region. Your presence is what makes this possible, and the bigger it is, well, the happier we become, really, because it's a lot of work to organize a WordCamp. So that was my advertising for today, and I think I'm done. I don't even know what time it is. What time is it? I'm good. Oh, great, thank you. And Jesus, yeah, I am done. Look at the time, I can't, it goes so fast, you don't even know what you're saying. And yeah, that's really it. We have like 2 minutes of questions, I think. Thank you. Yes.
I'm curious if you wanted to see that variable in a Gutenberg block. Is there visibility between the code and a Gutenberg block?
Yeah, there should be. You have to just make sure that you've, well, you know what, my JS is not really that great, but there should be, because you can do it the other way around, like from JS to PHP. So you use the, like I said with the password, anybody can enlighten me with that answer. Huh? I mean, I know you can use from PHP to JS. Yeah, you use the oh my God, localized script. Oh my God, yes. You use the localized script, exactly. You use the localized script and then you inject that value onto your inline script or external script, and you have access to it. I think that's it, right? Yeah, that's it. Correct. Thank you. Any other questions? I always get roasted with questions. That's from my point of view, I would limit them to perhaps maybe 5 to 10, the heaviest ones. I would start my way from heavy to light. Yeah. Yes.
So if you were to use that, wouldn't that defeat what you're talking about today?
Well, yeah, absolutely, but it's not, well, sometimes I didn't know the existence of that plugin, and yeah, but yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose, yeah. I mean, yeah. Any more questions? Thank you all, I'm really happy this went well. And see you all soon at the party. Thank you, have a good day. Gracias a todos.
Thank you, Marco. That was awesome. In about 5 minutes, we're going to be hearing from Corrine Stewart, who's going to be talking about diversity and inclusion in website development.
You'll be here all day? Okay. I'll see you, man. Dashboard.
You're a mess. I don't know how you graduated. We were frying tomatoes and lettuce. It would be slow motion. Get away from me. Put it on your phone.
Process.
that what city?
Yeah, that's in 230. Well, and that's the thing, we're not sure if we do that on top.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our talk about diversity and inclusion. Really appreciate the effort and the time that you guys take out of your day to learn more. So just a quick intro about me. My name is Corrine Stewart, and I am a jack of all trades, actually. I mainly am a director for Mass Code. It's a 501c nonprofit organization that we believe in pushing STEM and STEM-related occupations, especially for minorities. Because traditionally, as you'll see in my presentation, minorities have not been a big part of the STEM fields. I am a technical lead for Black Girls Code, and I've been working with them for over 6 years. So that's been a great enhancement for my life. I also am a facilitator for the Jamaican Diaspora Education Task Force. Jamaica has over 24,000 teachers in their Jamaican association that regularly log on every single week to get in education on different topics. So I'm a facilitator for some of their workshops. I am a big believer in equity in education. There's a huge push right now, and I'll explain the difference between equity and equality in a minute. A huge push right now for there to be equity in education. As traditionally it's been just about equality. And of course, diversity in tech. I am also a self-taught developer. In 2016, I just decided on my own to start to learn how to code. And now I have multiple certificates. I recently started learning C#. Before that was Java. So I'm also, on the side, I'll do some developing for websites and just things like that. But mostly I'm a fighter. I'm a fighter for STEM. And so I wanted to talk about diversity and inclusion. From the day that I started getting into the tech world, I've noticed that these are buzzwords, they're being pushed. Companies laud their diversity and inclusion initiatives, and they present photos that have claims of diversity and inclusion. But over the past years, as these initiatives have rolled out, a lot of studies have shown that they're failing, and not failing, but they're failing miserably. So, now they're still saying that they're going to overhaul some of these diversity and inclusion initiatives, but they're going to be changing, and we'll be talking about some of the ways that that will be changing. So I wanted to, first of all, introduce you guys to a picture, and I know that Facebook, because I see it all the time, with multiple pictures that talks about the difference between equality and equity. And it's not just about being short or in a wheelchair, but equality actually implies that each individual is getting the same. But equity focuses on eliminating the differences in the groups, and those differences are actually addressed. And so, in the graphic, you'll see that there are some people in the equality picture that, even though they have the same footing, they're still not able to see over the fence. But in the equity graphic, you can see that some have been given extra, some have not been given, one has not been given any. That's the difference between equality and equity. There's an opportunity gap right now, and that's one of my passions about, in speaking about equity in education. There's an opportunity gap. And not because these students don't study hard enough, it's because of the opportunities that were given, or maybe even the stumble blocks that were given to them in the first place. And in the design industry, whether it be development, computer programming, it's the same thing. There are a lot of gaps when it comes to opportunities, whether it be access, career, contracts, grants. There's just a lack of opportunities that are given to some of the groups that we'll be talking about. And so I did want to just, because I like to kind of challenge sometimes what people think, because I myself, I don't have all the answers, I don't know all the knowledge, so I'm always grappling for education. I always want to know what's the real deal, what's the reality versus what I have pictured in my mind. So I just wanted to, get us thinking, provoking some thought. The more you know, what is the #1 hate crime in the US? Is that something that you think about? And, some people are surprised by it, some people are not. The #1 crime in the US is race-related. So 58% of all hate crimes that happen in the US is race-related. And one of the questions, which of the following variables most closely predicts how high someone will score on the SAT test? And before I saw this, I didn't even know the answer. So I believe that it's really great knowledge to have. And so the #1 predictor of that is family income. And I do believe that the reason why some biases still exist is because there are a lot of false narratives out there, a lot of false information being just spread. I myself see it every day. Someone may share something on Facebook and someone just posts it. They don't look to see if it's false or if it's true. So they help to spread that negative narrative about people. All right. And so I wanted to start by saying exactly what diversity is. I know that there's a lot of people that have a hard time explaining what it is, so I just wanted to have a set definition as to what it was. So as you can see, it's about the differences that make us unique. And it's not limited to race, color, ethnicity, language that we speak, nationality, sexual orientation, gender, religion, socioeconomic status, age, or physical and mental ability. And then also, because a lot of people think that it has something to do just with race, I also wanted to put up this chart that says, no, it's about a lot of other things. Your political views, your work background, education, where you come from, your ethnic heritage, your age, your first language that you speak. I've heard people say things about that, especially here in Florida. Military experience, your religion. So it's not just about race. And then as I'm going through the material, I wanted you guys to actually think about these things. And these are questions that I would like for you to ask yourself while you're sitting here. Who was the last guest that you invited to your home for dinner? Who was the last person that you went out with socially? Who is your closest friend? Who is your current or previous romantic partner? Who is your spiritual leader? Who makes up the majority of people at your favorite club, local hangout spot? Who made up the majority of people in your childhood community? There's a saying, and I actually heard it like when I was little about, show me your circle and I'll tell you who you are. I don't know if anyone remembers that. The older people used to say it all the time. But I don't think I've ever heard anything truer. It's actually very accurate. When you see the circle of people that you intentionally put yourself around, these are the people who are influence you. These are the people whose ideas that you hear on a daily basis. Not to say that you're going to follow everything that they're saying, but after a while, it becomes a little bit more ingrained into you. All right, and then I wanted to give a definition of what inclusion is. Involvement and empowerment, where the inherent worth and dignity of all people are recognized. An inclusive university promotes and sustains a sense of belonging. It values and practices respect for the talents, beliefs, backgrounds, and ways of living of its members. So it's not just about diversity. And the reason why I would always want to use diversity and inclusion is because you have to have both. So that's where the studies see where it was failing, diversity was failing. You can't have diversity that works without inclusion. And just to give you some of the numbers of why we need diversity and inclusion when it comes to the tech industry or just web development, period. And this is actually from the US Census Bureau. This is just for developers, and this is web developers. 61% of developers identify as male, and 76% of developers list their race and ethnicity as white or of European descent. I love to say this because in Florida, we are such a melting pot. It's such a diverse community that you may even disagree with it because of what you see in your surroundings. But it's not like that as you move up. As you move up north, what you see here is different. So it's important that you're always having that in the back of your mind, that You know, even though you may be around diverse people, people of different nationalities, it's not always like that. Okay, and then I wanted to think about some of the components that would consist of a website, of web development. You have stock photos that are being used in web development, especially if you're using the free ones. There's not a lot of diversity in the stock photos. They're getting better because in 2018, Getty Images, you know, they started a development initiative. They started an initiative where they're diversifying the stock images. But just 2 years ago, if I put in anything about Black women, what would come up with the Black women were things like pornography and prostitution.
Hello?
Just 2 years ago.
Hello?
So, you know, that's something that has to be changed. I actually, you know, ran the test a couple of years, well, probably about last year, and it wasn't so bad, but it should have never been that way. So, you know, I'm glad that they're beginning to diversify the images that we're using now, but it can be better. Because now, you know, even looking for photos the other day for another product that I'm doing, I had to put in certain keywords to find exactly what I was looking for. Because I'm looking for diverse images, but the images that came back to me were not exactly what I wanted. So I'm still having to put in other keywords to find diverse images that communicate strength and positivity. It shouldn't be like that. When you're thinking about content, I don't know how many of you deal with content. I'm sure it's, you know, a lot of you guys. We have to be careful about the words that we're putting in our content. We have to be thinking about, you know, gender stereotypes that are in our content. When you're talking about shopping, are you only picturing a woman in your head? Are you only thinking about colors like pink and baby blue and stuff like that? You know, when you're conveying something that is, you know, like a criminal past or whatever, are you thinking, what kind of groups are you thinking about? So, you know, that's why we want to talk about bringing in people who are diverse, because not everyone's going to be thinking the same. That's why we need teams that are diverse. And that leads into my next thing, is thinking about your work partners. Because you may be a freelancer, but no freelancer are just, you know, they're not just on their own. I know a lot of freelancers that work with other people to get, you know, like big projects done or something like that. Or they may use a graphics person. Are you diversifying the people that you even contract with? Or are you going to someone who looks like you, thinks like you? So we need to have, even the people that, you know, we may give work to, are they diverse enough? Are you coming up with new ideas? So I wanted to talk about some of the work that we need to be doing. We need to recognize and acknowledge our own biases that we have, welcome different ideas than what we have, our own ideas. You know, so much creativity comes out of having someone that you can bounce ideas on. And just to give you an example, you know, of some of the different things that have gone on when you don't have diverse teams. Because I don't know if you guys remember that Gucci had an ad where it was of someone in a, I think it was a sweater, and she had red lips, and the sweater was like up to here, and it was black. And what it appeared as was like a blackface. And people were just, what do you call it? They were outraged by it, but they were also boycotting, that's the word I was using, I wanted to use. They boycott Gucci because they found out that there was no one on their team to say, hello, you can't do this. You can't put material out like this because it's going to offend someone. And trust me, we live in a hypersensitive society now where you can't do anything. I'm not advocating to go that far. You know how people are just so super sensitive nowadays. But something like that could have been easily stopped if they had one diverse person on their team. We have to have uncomfortable conversations with our peers. I have been in so many different situations, and I'm not the only person that may be the victim or may get offended. I have been in a situation before where I'm with someone in there of a different nationality, and someone just starts talking about this person from another country. And I've stood up and say, you can't say that stuff. And there were like maybe 10, 20 other people in the room. I don't know if people are just kind of scared to, say something, but if we all stood up to that kind of speech, there would be a lot of things that we can stop. So we need to hold our clients, managers, peers, and stakeholders responsible for the speech that they have, the conversations that they have about the organization's culture and depictions of diversity. The free stock images, as I said, can be a great resource, but if you're not able to find a diverse image, consider taking a picture yourself. Because I've actually heard someone say that they couldn't find a picture, so they just used another one instead. But, with camera phones being so good, there's no reason for you to not take your own picture. And then be purposeful about including people of different color and nationality and socioeconomic backgrounds. I think sometimes, I don't want to say lazy. I've already said it though. But I think sometimes we get a little like stalled or stagnant where we don't want to go out of our way. We don't want to get out of our comfort zone and say, let's do something different. Or maybe it's that, we have a fear of maybe upsetting management or upsetting a leader on our team, that we don't want to say anything, saying, maybe we should bring someone else in, especially when it comes to testing product, when it comes to testing a design, that's what we do. We're supposed to be obsessed about the user experience, right? So we need to be testing our websites with different groups. And as for companies, if you're a company, if you're an owner of a company, push for clear diversity goals and vision. Reduce the bias from the recruitment process. Candidates should be evaluated on what they're able to do and not, how they speak or what they look like. Even the wording in the job descriptions, that needs to be worked on. I'm still seeing be a dynamic rock star. I just go click. I don't understand why they still have that in job descriptions. Because studies show that wording like that is geared towards men. Create role models within your organization. Celebrate the people who put the work into making sure that their environments are diverse. What does your company's leadership look like? So I have to be very honest, whenever I am going somewhere or I am shopping somewhere or I'm getting involved with a company, the first thing I do is go on their website and look to see who is their leadership. I've done it for my church. I've done it for companies that I've worked with because it's important to me. I don't want to go somewhere where I'm not going to feel like I'm not welcomed. And because I've been through it enough, I know what to look for. And that doesn't go to say that, I don't interact with people who don't look like me, but it's comforting to me to go somewhere where someone looks like me. Does your employees have someone to look up to that they can culturally identify with? That's just something that I just said. Is there someone who's comfortable? Am I going somewhere where I may feel comfortable? Promote and hire on potential and not on proof, sometimes, right? I've heard people say that, like, you can't hire somebody on potential, but studies show that they do it for men. They do it for men. So why don't they do it for women? There is a stereotype that women have to prove what they're capable to do, but men don't. And that's not always the case, but this is studies that have been done for more than a decade that said that men are hired on their potential and women are not. They're hired on the proof of what they can do. Involve majority group members in minority efforts. Increasing representation is not a woman's issue and it's not a person of color's issue. It's all of our issues. And you'll see in a minute the case that I make for diverse teams. And then implement flexible work-life policies. And I'm so glad that the men are backing us on that right now. Men are actually wanting more flexible life balance. They want to be home with the baby when the baby's born, 6-7 weeks. And studies have shown how great of an impact that can be on the baby's life, that the man is home with the baby for 6 weeks, getting that bonding time and feeding the baby. And don't punish the employees that actually utilize it. What good is the policy if they're not utilizing it? All right, and so in your design, for the people who are at home, putting your head down, designing everything, redefine what normal is. We've been conditioned over the years, what we see on the media, what we see in pop culture is a lack of diversity. TVs, movies, magazines, books. As designers, we're putting work into the world that we can represent a new type of normal. Redefine masculine and feminine. The work that we do as designers can actually redefine all the roles that we see now. It's actually in our hands. Because when I see something, that's what I grew up on. I grew up on seeing these images on TV. There are people behind those images that are responsible for what we believe today. Build accessible experiences. The products we work on are designed with the perceived majority of our users in mind. Again, we should be obsessed about the user experience. What do the users need? What do the users need to see? Focus on meeting accessibility standards immediately, meaning more inclusive experiences. These bracelets. Remove bias from your design process and put a reminder by your desk to always be thinking about diversity. Are you bringing people from different disciplines to your brainstorm sessions? Are you doing enough user research? And when you do so, are you bringing a diverse group of people to test it? And the last thing is to put yourself in the shoes of your user. Test your design out again with diverse groups of people. And so, I didn't know, until I started doing these diversity inclusion modules that there has been evidence for about 20 or 25 years or so that says this is what you get with diverse teams. You get increased profits, you get higher employee engagement, more innovation, increased creativity, improved performance, and better problem solving and decision making. So you mean to tell me we do the right thing and we get more money? I mean, it's a win-win. So I don't understand why these companies or companies, individuals, freelancers, everyone is not doing this. The research is out there now. Of course, there's a con. It's, because we've been doing the things the same way all the time, it is difficult to maintain this. It's difficult to maintain it. They've always said it's a problem with the pipeline, but it's not really a problem with the pipeline. And the reason why I say that is because there's actually been a study out now, I think they've been out for 2 years, which is AI Now Institute, where they're saying that it's not a problem with the pipeline, it's a problem with the search process. So when they're looking for the candidates, they're only looking in a couple places. So it's really not a problem with the pipeline. But of course, you're still gonna have problems because if you have someone on a team who's never been on a diverse team before, there may be some adaptability problems. But as we get to the place where we're more comfortable with diverse teams, those problems will go away. All right, and so this is my information. We would like for you to give feedback on my talk.rocks. And this is my email in case anyone had any more questions. And if you have any questions right now, I'd be glad to answer them. All right. Well, okay.
You mentioned pipelines, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's important. Actually going to certain organizations that promote, looking into diverse pools of candidates, right? Do you have any recommendations on those?
Of where to go?
Yeah.
Oh, I have a list.
That's what I want.
Yeah, I mean, are you local?
I'm local, I'm here in Miami, yeah.
Oh, I have a whole list. And there's some other people here that have lists too, right? Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of places that you can go. I mean, I myself, I came out of a boot camp called Launch Code that they actually, their target group is what do you call it? Minorities. It's minorities, but that's just one program. And they actually had one last year at the little Haiti Cultural Center. So whatever you need, I bet you I can find it for you.
Yeah, because I'm a developer, obviously, right? Well, I could be more likely be a developer because I'm here at this conference, so it'd be great to, go after, minorities that are developers. I'm looking for developers. So.
I have plenty. Whatever you need, I have it. I have people right now who have about 6 years of experience developing, great people. And they somehow, it's very difficult for them to find a job. So,
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I've been for 10 years.
Okay.
So it would be nice to have some more pipelines to offer my higher ups and
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually, because the beginning I spoke about my involvement with Black Girls Code, I'm a technical lead. I go out and I recruit the volunteers for Black Girls Code. So I meet people all the time who are developers, programmers, people who just graduated with their computer science degree. So I have access to a lot of different people and organizations, especially throughout the time that I've been in the tech industry, because I'm just engaged. As I said, I'm a STEM advocate, so I know a lot of people. So if anyone needs anybody, I got you. All right? Oh, go ahead.
And how the intention
We don't have time for that. Oh man, that would have to be for another talk. And the reason why I say that is because you would have to start with a foundation for that. You know, I'm about to go into my patois. My family's from Jamaica, so sometimes those words just come out. Yeah, I would have to start with a foundation for that. So that would be for another time, but thank you. All right, well, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone.
In a few minutes with Michelle, who's going to be talking to us about user-centered design and tips for developers.
I'm sure somebody could they said that if you have to bring it to registration, so yeah. Somebody probably brought it there. But trust me, they're not, no one here. No.
Yeah.
I'm talking like you're my son.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amy, why are you? You know exactly where it is.
He knows what he said.
How many more minutes to the next session?
Oh.
there anyone can borrow some of your plugs?
Pardon me?
Can I borrow one of your plugs?
I can't hear you.
Can I borrow one of your plugs to plug in? Is there space?
I don't think there's any more room in there.
No. Oh, that's one right there.
There wasn't a plug in that hole down there?
No, it's not enough.
There should be two.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do you know the keys to brighten the keyboard lights?
Oh, the keyboard light? I don't know if this has.
You don't have a
feature.
PC?
Yeah, I have a PC, but
So what? How do you get your lights to go up and down?
Oh no, that came with that.
It's always up.
Yeah, it's always. I could shut it off or shut it on. It's
How do you
usually a button.
how do you shut it on and off? What button?
No, the computer has to come with it. Like
It does come with it.
with the lights.
Yeah, but I don't know how to make it bright. No. No. I'm going to call the company. Forget. Yeah, that's okay.
Because mine's is.
It's usually one of those. I know.
Yeah, it's right here.
Let me see. Oh wait, I gotta take care of this. Which key?
That key right there. I usually shut the light on. Yeah.
Oh, all right. I'm sure I have a back keyboard thing.
Anybody who wants to get a head start on my talk, if you can, if you're willing to, if you want to participate in a 20-second challenge, you can get a little bit of a head start by going to my, find me on Twitter, Michelle Wasabi. Find me afterwards if you want to know why Wasabi. And there is a tweet that I pinned. If you can click on that, it's an Envision prototype, super rough prototype. It's just meant for this challenge. And just have it ready to go, but try to resist clicking on anything so that we can start all together. Just if you want to get a little bit of a heads up, like I said, it's a 20-second challenge for all of us to participate in. Okay, so get started. It's good. All right, cool. All right, hi everyone. I am Dr. Michelle Wilshire. I am a product designer and a psychologist with a small practice here in Miami. And I'm really excited to be here, back at WordCamp. I love the community here. And I did a version of this talk, I think it was November last year. And it was really exciting, really validating, because it was actually supposed to be like a 40-minute talk that turned into a 90-minute discussion with a room full of devs, where they were firing questions and they were really engaged in wanting to know how they could walk away with even just one or two tips or tools that they can add to their tool belt when they are strapped for resources. I've worked alongside devs, I code a little bit myself, and sometimes you're switching left brain, right brain, back and forth because you don't have a designer on your team, or you're working on a side project and you can't afford to have a designer on your team. Or there's designers available, but they're just not accessible at the moment. Someone hands you some assets, copy, things like that, and you're just forced to kind of do something with it. So anyhow, that's what I hope that this talk gives you, is a couple of tips to walk away with. So jumping right in, and this will not turn into a 90-minute talk, do not worry. I have my timer set. What I'd like for you to do is go to my Twitter account, find me on there, get that Envision prototype, pull it up. Anybody found me on there? Any problems finding me? And so you're gonna pull up that prototype. It's a mobile version. All right. And and show in here. And I want you to do is stand up. I know it's the end of the day, we're almost there, but anyone's participating, stand up, and we're going to participate in a quick exercise. I'm gonna go over here. All right, so you have the prototype up. I want you to select the hand that you hold the phone in predominantly. You're gonna have the phone in your hand. If it's your right hand, left hand, whichever one. And I want you to first find an uncomfortable position to get into. All right? So don't hurt yourself. Uncomfortable does not mean pain. What I mean by that, and it's getting a little tough for me to do some things now, but you might be down here, holding the phone underneath your leg, or stretching really high. Or you can sit down in a chair and sort of lean back. Just don't drop the phone on your face. And the point is, get in an uncomfortable position where it's just different. It's not sitting back in a chair, throwing back some beers, using an app, all right? Once you get into an uncomfortable position, the objective is to find the coupon. So you're gonna click through the prototype, find the coupon, you'll know it when you see it. And you can only use one hand. Only using one hand. You have 20 seconds, go. So you find the position, 20 seconds. When you find it, if you find it, give yourself a round of applause. All right, you got about 10 more seconds. Counting down. 5, found it? 4, awesome, you're done. 3, 2, 1, great, okay. All right, you can all have a seat, thank you. And so did only 2 people find the coupon? Is that right? Yep, 2, 3 people? All right, and what did you do to find that coupon?
I went to HERCHEL school and looked through it, and I looked at the menu, and I saw special. And so I figured specials would have.
And there it was, quick thinking. And someone who didn't find it, what roadblocks did you run into? Didn't it pop up? Anyone else? So it wasn't working right?
Only with the right hand, I couldn't reach the menu on the thick phone.
Thank you, yes, all right. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. I was like, oh, will someone say it? How many people in this room are right-handed? Right-handed, I'm not right-handed, I'm actually left-handed. So it sounds like most of the room is right-handed. Now, how many people are left-handed but use the phone, predominantly use their right hand to hold the phone? Yep. Yeah. So I know this is gonna sound a little bit bad, but we are still putting that top nav all the way on the left corner when a majority of people, whether they're left or right-handed, use the phone in their right hand. And until someone of you, wonderful people, figure out how to allow users to move that nav wherever they like, whenever they like, we're kind of stuck picking a side. So when you have, in some ways, best practices based off of data and research, humans, we are behavioral beings. We're observing, we're taking cues. So even me as a left-hander, I do a lot of things with my right hand because I'm observing all the right-handers do it. Both my parents are right-handed, right? So something to keep in mind is that there are best practices. And so if you have a product out there right now that's using a drop-down, a collapsible nav on mobile devices, switch it to the right. You may make a lot of your users a lot happier. How did you feel doing that quick 20-second challenge? Anyone want to just express really quickly how they felt? Anxious, okay. Awkward, yes. Doing some silly things in front of other people, absolutely. Anyone just felt, awkward, silly? Well, congratulations. You are probably not a psychopath because you felt something. And guess what? If you can feel something, then that also means you're able to empathize. That gets thrown around a lot. You'll hear designers always say, empathize with the user. Empathize with the user. Well, what exactly does that mean? Even though we kind of understand it in theory, How do you do it? Well, one way is to make yourself uncomfortable. As a dev, maybe sometimes you go to a dark corner and you just hack away and do what you got to do to meet a deadline. But in a private space, you can be silly and make yourself uncomfortable and potentially find some of the barriers that are occurring with your particular app or a new feature that you've added. So we went to the how do you feel. So how can we improve? How can we have improved that prototype? Well, we already said maybe moving the top nav, if you don't have any bottom navigation, over to the right. There was some hidden UI. Yes, you did find the coupons and the specials, but is it the best way to label those links? If coupons is something that people use your app for and find value in, then maybe that it should be seen right away versus having to click into it or labeling it something else. The back button. Some people will argue, well, you're on a mobile phone, so why can't you just swipe back? But we need to give users control. We like control. We just love it. If you can say, well, I'm going to eat this today, I'm going to go here today, I'm going to do that today. We absolutely love having control, and our users do as well. So, making sure I'm on time here. There are multiple things that we could have changed in that very rough prototype that I created on Envision, including adding some search functionality. The same way that people learn in different ways, people use the internet in different ways. So some people, they come to your site, they know exactly what they want. They don't need a tutorial or anything like that. They go straight to that search and they're popping in some words and they're looking for coupons. That's how they get to where they're going to go. And with the advancement in how we search on Google, our users are quite savvy now. They're also expecting more, like autocomplete and autocorrect and suggestive searches. So some of this may sound very basic, like, oh, I've heard this already. But really, think about some of the products that you have out there right now or are coming up, some new features that you're adding that don't include something as simple as a back button, which I have seen, I've done it myself, forgotten to put the back button, and it happens, right? It does happen. So part of the reason why I'm also very excited about talks like this is going back to the basics and understanding why. Like, why is this important for us to know? Why is it important to consider the user? Well, let's think about, up here I'm saying business needs, but I really just mean one business need in particular. Whether we're talking about location, or actually you can have a business or startup of different, selling different products, different locations, different sizes, a different vision, but most of those businesses, probably all, will have one overlapping business need. What is that business need? Take a guess.
Money.
Money. Yes, yeah. Absolutely. Because if we don't make some money, what happens? Exactly. We have hashtag Wayfair layoffs. Sorry, but it happened. 500 and something plus people were laid off. And apparently, from what I was reading, they haven't made significant revenue since 2014. Big problem. Maybe it's not a UX issue. Maybe it wasn't a dev issue. We don't know. But the point is you want to avoid those problems. And if you are starting your own startup yourself, you and a small team, you do need some type of monetary resource to keep things going. So when we're making more money, when the product is doing well, we typically see user engagement, right? The user is interested in what you have to offer. They are finding, essentially, what they're saying to you is, I see your value. I see the value in this product. Now, they're not speaking directly to you, right? They're not saying, I see you, but they're thinking more about themselves, that they found some value in your product. So this is part of the reason why we're here, why it's important to keep rolling and understanding that in my eyes, it's all the same. More money, add value, business needs, user engagement. Like, it doesn't really matter what order it goes in, that these 4 things are going to be incredibly important to the success of your product. So we've already gone through some of my favorite tips, but now I'm going way too fast. Going back. Okay, here we go. All right. So we've already gone through some of the tips here. We just don't have enough time to go through all of them, but please find me afterwards or on social media, of course, to ask me questions. So the next tip seems very obvious: to use lists. And just as devs, you refactor code and you add for loops and if, else statements because you see a pattern that's happening. So you go back and like, oh, wasted some time here. And you go back and improve the code and optimize the code. Sometimes we are handed some copy, some asset of some type, and we are forced to make a design decision, and we put it in, and it's paragraph text, and it's unnecessary. So you can always go back and look at your work and say, well, here's where we could add list. And I wanted to, sorry, we already did that, humor you a little bit, humor myself really, and see what it would look like if we walk into a Chipotle, and there were no more lists, right? We expect a list, but instead it says, you can choose a burrito base, you can choose a taco base, you can do this and you can do that. It would be pretty unbearable. You would never really get to your customers because they'd be too busy reading paragraphs. I know this seems silly, but some of the paragraphs that we have on our sites right now, or our biographies or our portfolios, are kind of like this, instead of a scannable UI. Whenever we watch users use our products, we like video record them and record their screen, it's incredible. They move so fast. They're just scrolling. When they see something that they're interested in, they stop, and then they keep on scrolling. It's just amazing to watch. Next time you get a chance to just observe over someone's shoulder, not too creepily, of course, and just see how they're using the apps. All right, so make sure I'm on. So the last 2 that I want to share with you today. Yes, cool. The last 2 for today. So serial positioning I want to mention because I think it's a pretty simple one that you can hold on to. There was a psychologist way back when, a German psychologist, Ebbinghaus, and through their studies of memory and recall and like attention, they realized that humans tend to place importance and find it easier to remember things that are either first on a list or first in a position and last. So that goes for whether it's a list, bullet point list, or even your navigation links at the top of your page, or the content on your landing page, for example. That's why when you have, you have a hero image, you have a call to action that's right away, but also at the end of the page. So all of that stuff in the middle, it's kind of like, was it Charlie Brown, the adults? It's like a wah, 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 in the middle. Your users may be just skimming right over that. Not everyone, of course, it's still a bit of a generalization. But if you really want your users to know, or you want to make that sell, focus on the very first couple of sections, and then the last couple of sections. So just a little takeaway, hopefully that helps when you're thinking about some of the projects you're working on. And so, so the next one that I absolutely love, I think it's a lot of fun, at least for me, I'm kind of a nerd sometimes, but offline examples versus online examples. And we're just gonna walk through what that really means. So we're gonna sell some donuts here. I don't know, been craving donuts a bit lately. So offline interactions, We have Sarah. This picture, she's got a donut, so I was excited to find this picture. And let's just imagine that Sarah has a really tough life, she has a really tough week at work, and donuts is the thing that comforts her, right? She kind of copes with it. And she would walk through a series of steps to get those donuts if she were actually doing it like in this realm, right? Not ones and zeros, but here in this space. And I came up with about maybe a good 10 steps, let's just say, roughly, right? So she searches, she gets to the shop, she walks inside, and she instantly sees donuts. That's a very important point. So not only is it important to know that there's roughly about 10 steps between a donutless Sarah and a content Sarah, but that she walks in and she immediately sees these donuts. The colors, the names, the prices, all the very important information. And checking out is really quick and easy. Someone else does it for her. So let's look at the equivalent of that when we move this interaction from offline to online. So the online, the first step is actually in offline it was the first 1 to 3 steps. She does a keyword search, she finds the donuts, she lands on the page, whichever one that she selects, and she starts to scan. Right away, when she lands on that page, she sees donuts. And maybe there's a card design with donut images, prices, names, all the things that she would have seen anyways in person. She has the ability to add donuts to the cart. Then she starts her checkout. It's very quick checkout. She gets to use Google, OAuth or whatever. She's able to just quickly get to selecting, paying, checking out, deciding how they're going to be delivered, and the next thing you know, she's enjoying her donuts. So those 10 steps we can break down into a much quicker 4 steps when we go from offline to online. But what you'll also notice never happened when Sarah was both in store and also on the landing page, is that at no point when she walked in the store was there a man in a donut outfit dancing in front of the clear glass and the donuts, blocking her view, which would also be the equivalent of that pop-up. You know, the minute you get here and 2 seconds in, hey, save 20%. That didn't happen. Because how annoying is that? Just think about the dancing donut guy who's blocking your view the minute you walk in. That wouldn't happen in offline world in real life. So let's not translate that into our online product. So I love this step. I love doing this one because it allows me to look at each element of that offline interaction and get Post-it notes and draw out what it would look like and translate to online, and it gets straight to the point, right? KISS, keep it simple, silly. There's no BS, there's no extra crud in the middle. It's just, here is the basics, starting with the basics. And then you can get fancy if you like. But this to me helps be a reminder to even myself when I'm designing to not get distracted from the goal, because we need, like we said, user engagement, we need to add value. Adding value is incredibly important. So what I want for you to do, and let me back up, we need to add value because that's what's going to sell, that's what's going to make more money, that's what's going to keep you employed and to feel successful. So, what I want you to do is turn to someone near you, if you have someone near you, and quickly exchange names. Just get their name. If there's no one near you, just observe. All right? So you got their name, and with a lot of love and care and tenderness in your eyes, I want you, that's that part, to say their name and tell them it's not about you. Michelle, it's not about you. It's just not. Right? It's not a disrespect, it's just a reminder that when a user loves your product, they aren't thinking about you. They're not thinking about Michelle and, oh, she's so great. They don't even know who I am. They don't care, right? They just want to get to their end goal. Their time is just as valuable as your time, right? So you can also think about, that GraphQL API endpoint that you worked on, that you're so proud of, that new feature that's so cool. And you can also tell yourself, hey, Michelle, that endpoint you just worked on, it's not about you. That's your passion. So just as a little reminder, what it's really, truly about. It's about adding value to the user's life, increasing engagement, and therefore the revenue in the business that you're working in. So, kind of clumsy with this thing. So giving value and then asking for business is very important. Otherwise, what do users do when they don't find value within a very short period of time? They bounce, okay, real fast. And like that emotional thing that we did earlier where there was some emotions of feeling awkward, we're human, we're going through emotions all the time. They will love you and hate you in the same breath, all right? And you meaning your product. So it's a struggle, and I really feel for devs, like full stack, back end. I mean, your jobs are so incredibly difficult, especially when you're taxed for resources. This is why I love doing talks like this, because I just feel like, I feel for you. I feel for the decisions that you have to make and being put in tough situations. So just as a reminder, hopefully there's a tip or two that you can take with you and apply to your next product, your next feature, or even retroactively to some things that you have been working on. If you have any questions, I think we have a minute or two before we go to the game show. Feel free to reach out to me on social media or contact me directly if you have more questions. Also, I love feedback because I want to keep growing and adding value. Thank you.
How do you feel about the feature where somebody says, stay logged in? I'm thinking that maybe is the kind of thing you're talking about. If somebody doesn't, they got to go through here and there and there. When they come back to your site, they don't have to log in again.
Right.
Do you find that today?
So I think it also depends on the product itself. So I've worked in medical tech, and I'm also, because I'm a therapist, I have to log out for privacy, security purposes. I'm not trying to get sued by anybody, right? So I think it also depends on the product itself. But if you're making something that's like a shopping type app, like, where you just click, scan, and go, yeah, if you have to keep logging in, like I've been having that problem with a few of my apps, where I have to go and find my password again. I'm just annoyed, and the FaceTime's not, or the whatever it's called, is not working, Face Detect, and it's just frustrating because it's not a serious product. It's not life or death, and no one's getting sued, right? So I just think kind of gauge it, versus it being black and white, right or wrong kind of decision. Yeah. Any more questions? No? Great. All right. Let's go win some things over there. All right?
That's it for today. That's it for today, right? We are not on 150. What is that? Huh?